Okay. Now that I have my pieces cut, I'm ready to start the install. Before starting the install, as you can see, got my lines, I've got everything ready to go, parallel, vertical. Once I get started, I gotta check for, like we talked before, to make sure the wall's flat. If you're putting on a 1/2 inch mortar and you have an 1/8 inch dip, like we do right here, that's going to be more mortar, so your tile's going to sink in. What you want to do is fill that in, take your straight edge and get rid of that. You know, we have certain areas, like up at the top, where you're good. Then next thing you know, we're not good. If you fill those in beforehand, you'll have less issues once you start the install. But for the most part, once we get going, we want to make sure what we got. And this wall, of course, I didn't do that, but we'll start it anyways. Once you learn more, you learn how to back butter, what to expect. But starting the install, the mortar, we start with the mortar. It's probably a oatmeal consistency. Butter up the tile. Slap it on the wall. Go to the next piece. And you always want to start with a couple pieces or half wall. So we can get a nice flat plumb area. If you just go with one piece, you don't know how it's going to affect the pieces around it. Once we have those together, we'll take our level. And we're way up. We have that big dip right here. So what I'll do, I'll pop the pieces off. Add mortar to the middle. And you do that until your level sits nice and flat. Once you're sitting flat, keep all your pieces butted together. Don't put spacers in until you're ready to build it up. As you can see, the way the pieces are in now, with the level onto it, I'm hitting at the top. So what I've got to do is I've got to adjust these bottom pieces by pulling them out and aligning them so when I put my level at the bottom, I have the same spacing the entire way up. And it's sort of a guess, but either way, now I have, instead of having this tight, now I have a nice, I should have that 1/2 inch the whole way up the wall. And you'll have to adjust this throughout, and depending on the type of wall, you know, I've got a 4-footer here, where typically I'll use an 8-footer to make sure that I'm going to get all the way up there to the ceiling without issue. and you can move it and adjust it as you go to a certain extent, but you don't want to dip, you don't want waves in your wall. You want it to keep one nice plane. And if that means building it out a 1/2 inch at the top, because that's how out of plumb it is, that's kind of what you have to do. When you have smaller 12 by 12 tile, you can go in and out, but the bigger the tile, the less options you have. But once we have those two pieces on, our next step is to get them re-level again. Get our spacers back under there. Get our middle spacer. And then the next step, we put our next tile on. And one of the biggest things when we're doing this, and the reason we butter up the tile instead of the wall, a little bit cleaner, but if we have to add more here and there, we can do it per piece instead of having to do add more to the wall. But we get our piece on, make sure that we're nice and tight at the top and bottom, make sure we still have room going up, and it's still going to be able to keep out of the wall. We got our second piece ready. Once we get our second piece buttered up, we slap it on, make sure it's aligned. And with these pieces, this has too much mortar on this side doesn't. So I'll get a little mortar on my trowel, pull it back, and add a little bit more. And when you take it down, you're going to see there's no tile on or no mud on this piece or on this edge, so it's obviously got a void in it, and those are the areas you fill in. Once it's filled in and the edges look like they're nice and tight together, you grab a sponge. And that's the biggest thing with doing wall tile. You always want a bucket with a sponge next to you. You wipe everything down. Align it. And see how it looks. Now that it looks like everything's going up good and sideways good, you space it out. and go to your next piece. Always double check, make sure that you're going vertical, parallel, that you're keeping your planes going good. But you continue that piece to piece. Once you get all the pieces in, typically I'll do the verticals. So I'll set the entire wall up, make sure everything's nice, flat, smooth, parallel, all that, and then I'll fill in the sides. So on this project I'm doing just the side walls, then I can put a couple pieces down the floor. Then tomorrow, instead of having to work in this little room getting myself pissed off, tomorrow I'll come back and fill everything in so I don't have to be so confined to one space.